I'm delighted to welcome President Macron back to the White House. We've been together quite often, but not that often in the White House. We honored the President, First Lady of France, not so long ago. There was a beautiful evening, and we will not soon forget it. It was a beautiful day and evening, and many fond memories. I also want to thank Emmanuel for hosting me in Paris last December after a historic election win to witness the reopening of the spectacular Notre Dame Cathedral, where you did an outstanding job in bringing it back together. That was a sad day watching that burn, and 5 years later you had it up, and it was, they say, more beautiful than it was before, so I think that's a great achievement. That was not easy. France is America's oldest ally. Our cherished partnership has been a force for freedom, prosperity, and peace from the very beginning. We're now working on some very interesting developments. One in particular, as you know, the war between Russia and Ukraine. In the American Revolution, French support helped us to seize our destiny as an independent nation. In the First and Second World Wars, our citizens shed blood together on the battlefields of Europe. And I'll never forget joining President Macron 6 years ago on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was some day. The purpose of our meeting today is to end another battle, a really horrible one, a war, something that we haven't seen since the Second World War, that is ravaging European soil, the deadliest and most destructive conflict that one can imagine. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellite photos, and lots of other photos, and it's a horrible thing that's happening. Thousands of people are dying a week. This very day is the 3rd anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, which would never have happened if I was president. That was not going to happen. The horrors of this gruesome and bloody war can scarcely be overestimated. Hundreds of thousands of people, Russians and Ukrainians in particular, have needlessly died. An entire generation of Ukrainians and Russian men has been decimated. 1,000-year-old cities have been turned into rubble. Those beautiful spires that you used to see there, they were most beautiful in the world, they say, are lying in heaps of rubble, blasted to smithereens. It's time to end this bloodletting and restore peace, and I think we're going to do it. We've had some great conversations, including with Russia. Since my return to the White House, we've made more progress toward that goal in 1 month than occurred in the past 3 years. And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff conducted successful talks in Saudi Arabia with the delegation from Russia, and I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the King and Mohammed, great people. They're really working hard to get this done. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere, because he's been very much involved right from the beginning in trying to get it over with, and we're going to get it done. I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important issues. Chief among them is this is the right time. It may be the only time. You know, that's a very interesting and horrible situation, and that could evolve into a Third World War. We're not going to let that happen. Should have never started, but it did. And what a mess, what a horrible, bloody mess. I'm also pleased that President Macron agrees that the cost and burden of securing the peace must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States. And Europe must take that central role in assuring long-term security of Ukraine, which they want to do. And that's not a very big step. A big step is what's going to happen over the next few weeks. The United States has put up far more aid for Ukraine than any other nation. Hundreds of billions of dollars. We've spent more than 300 billion, and Europe has spent about 100 billion. That's a big difference, and at some point we should equalize. But hopefully we won't have to worry about that. We have other things happening that maybe take that out of the realm of necessity. And while we've given vast amounts of military aid and money in form of grants, much of Europe's contribution has been economic relief structured as loans, for which they'll be repaid. Like the Europeans, I believe that taxpayers in the United States also deserve to recoup the colossal amounts of money that we've sent. The previous administration never even thought of that. They didn't think of a lot of things, like why did they let it start in the first place? That is why we must have an agreement with Ukraine on critical minerals and rare earths and various other things as security. And I think that that's happening. I think we've made a lot of progress. I had a report just given to me before walking in that we've made, Emmanuel, a great deal of progress toward getting that. I've been elected by the American people to restore common sense to Washington and indeed to the world. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace. My administration is making a decisive break with the foreign policy failures of the past administration and, frankly, the past. I ran against a very foolish foreign policy establishment, and their recklessness has led to the death of many, many people. Under our administration, we're forging a new path that promotes peace around the world. And when I left office for the first administration, first term, we had no wars, we had no problems. We didn't have October 7th with Israel. We didn't have Russia and Ukraine going at it. We didn't have the problems in other parts of the Middle East. We didn't have inflation. It was a whole different world. And you know what else we didn't have? Millions of people pouring through our borders, many of them criminals released from other nations and put right into our land, murderers and drug dealers, gangs. We didn't have any of that. It's a different time, but now we have it and we're fixing it. We'll fix it all up. We'll get it done as quickly as possible. And we've made a great deal of progress. People are saying it was the best month for a president in our country's history. I hope that's right, but I feel it's right. We've done a lot of things in a very short period of time, 4 weeks. As I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy, however, will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. I want to bring peace, not war. I thank President Macron for joining us today in this urgent work we're doing. And we have some wonderful people up front right here that have worked so hard. Steve Witkoff, thank you very much. And Michael Walsh, thank you. Scott, thank you very much. And JD, thank you. They've really done a job. They worked very hard. It's a real passion to get this war ended. And I'd like to now invite Emmanuel to say a few words, and then we'll take questions. And again, Emmanuel, it's a great honor to have you with us at the White House. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Donald. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, je vais dire quelques...
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be saying a few words in French. Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear Donald, for your hospitality and for this visit. As you mentioned, we have had the opportunity to meet over the past few years. Since your first term, we've been able to discuss matters in Paris and also here at the White House, and it has always been a great joy to do that, and I would like to commend you. And thank you, Mr. President, for extending this friendship to France and taking part in the ceremony at Notre Dame that you mentioned before. It was a great honor for the French people to reopen the cathedral to the rest of the world, and your presence was a testament to that friendship. As the President said, this friendship dates back to the Revolutionary War, since the beginning of the United States, and whenever we've needed to, we've been able to come together and be on the right side. We've been able to be united to defend peace and sovereignty, namely in the 2 world wars that marked the 20th century. from Lafayette to Pershing and to the many Americans who landed on Omaha Beach. And we spoke earlier before, and you mentioned that one of those gentlemen was able to visit you here, one of the veterans. This is part of history, which puts us in the world that we are in today. And as the President just said, there are many challenges in this world. And over the past few days, we have one main objective, which is the geopolitical situation. Mr. President, I really wish to thank you for making changes to your schedule to meet with us so quickly. I think we've made very substantive steps forward during our discussions, and this is a major step in what we're experiencing today. We had a video conference with all of the G7 leaders, which was an opportunity for us to discuss this matter 3 days after the Russian war in Ukraine and to express our support for President Zelensky to the Ukrainian people, but also to speak and share about our desire for a lasting peace. This is what we have spoken about very forcibly over the past few weeks. We thought that this war was only going to last a few weeks when it broke out in 2022. We admire greatly the courage of the Ukrainian people. And Mr. President, I wish to thank you for this. You mentioned that there are responsibilities on Europe's side, and indeed, we have invested $128 billion in aid to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. Ukraine has been able to hold the front of our collective security. It's fought over these past few years for its independence and for its sovereignty, but also for our collective security, because I think that no one in this room wants to live in a world where it's the law of the strongest and international borders can be violated from one day to the next by anyone. Over the past few hours, and as you mentioned this, Mr. President, we've been able to see a few things take shape. First of all, allow me to commend you on your decision to work with President Zelensky and to conclude this agreement that's so important for the U.S. and Ukraine on rare earths, critical minerals, but also having substantive conversations with President Zelensky during this key phase of achieving this deal, which is a major commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's...
Votre volonté de bâtir la paix, nous la partageons. Et je veux dire ici que, en responsabilité, plus de 10 ans après le début de la guerre et l'agression en Crimée, et 3 ans jour pour jour après l'agression russe dans le Donbass, et je le rappelle aussi dans le nord du pays à l'époque, la paix est une nécessité pour sauver des vies, pour aussi faire revenir des prisonniers chez eux, faire revenir des familles et des enfants, car je n'oublie pas ce drame humanitaire qui touche aussi le peuple ukrainien. Et nous en avons longuement discuté avec le président et notre souhait qu'il puisse y avoir en effet des conflits qui s'arrêtent, une trêve qui soit pleinement mesurable, vérifiable et qui permette la négociation d'une paix durable dans laquelle il y aura la question de la reconstruction de l'Ukraine, la question de ses territoires et la question des garanties de sécurité, c'est-à-dire du maintien de la paix dans la durée. Car je le redisais au président, nous avons déjà connu des accords de paix qui n'étaient que des cessez-le-feu sans prévoir ces garanties de sécurité. Cela s'est appelé Minsk I puis Minsk II, et nous savons d'expérience que cela ne tient pas. Et je sais la volonté du président d'être un acteur durable justement de la paix dans la région, de vouloir cesser dans la durée cette paix. Et je crois pouvoir dire, après avoir consulté une trentaine de dirigeants européens et alliés ces derniers jours, pour bâtir cette unité et pour venir vous voir, que tous partagent la même vision des choses. Nous voulons la paix. Cette paix ne peut pas signifier la capitulation de l'Ukraine. Cette paix ne peut pas être un cessez-le-feu sans garantie. Cette paix doit prévoir les conditions d'une souveraineté ukrainienne, permettre à l'Ukraine de négocier avec les parties prenantes toutes les questions qui la touchent et pour laquelle elle est seule légitime à négocier. Mais c'est une paix dans laquelle nous devons prendre nos responsabilités pour maintenir dans la durée sécurité et stabilité pour l'Ukraine et pour toute la région. Et pour nous, Européens, c'est une question existentielle. Nous avons longuement discuté cela avec le président. J'ai pu lui dire tout ce que nous avions travaillé avec le président Zelensky. On est rentré dans le détail, justement, des différentes étapes d'une telle négociation. Et nous avons pu aussi évoquer tout le travail qui a été fait avec nos partenaires britanniques pour concevoir, justement, ce que pourraient être des déploiements de forces de paix sur le sol ukrainien qui constitueraient une part de ces garanties de sécurité à laquelle d'autres pays, d'ailleurs, sont prêts à se joindre et pour laquelle, évidemment, la solidarité, le soutien américain sont indispensables. Et je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, d'avoir commencé le travail avec nous sur ce point. Et je crois pouvoir dire que l'accord que vous vous apprêtez à signer avec l'Ukraine et la discussion très claire que nous avons eue à cet égard, pour moi, sont des garanties solides, que nous nous sommes compris et que notre volonté est la même. La paix le plus vite possible, une paix solide et durable pour tout le monde, et la reprise en quelque sorte d'une vie internationale qui permette d'offrir à tous des responsabilités. Donc dans ce cadre, des Européens qui prendront leurs responsabilités aux côtés de leur allié américain qui prendra les siennes. À cet égard, je suis venu aussi ici porter un message, Président, de très grande clarté de l'engagement européen. Nous sommes engagés pour bâtir une paix durable, nous sommes engagés comme Européens pour être partie prenante, justement, de ces garanties de sécurité, et plus largement, nous sommes engagés, conscients que nous sommes, que les Européens doivent encore faire davantage pour la sécurité de l'Europe, sa défense, et en quelque sorte un partage plus juste du fardeau sécuritaire que votre pays porte depuis plusieurs années. Et au fond, pas simplement, Monsieur le Président, vous savez l'amitié que je vous porte parce que vous le demandez, vous le demandiez déjà avec force à votre premier mandat, mais parce que je crois que tout le monde maintenant en Europe est lucide sur le fait que c'est notre devoir pour nous-mêmes, en tant qu'Européens, compte tenu du risque qui nous entoure et de la responsabilité qui est la nôtre. Et donc le président Costa ce matin a rappelé cet agenda de Versailles de mars 2022 qui a déjà conduit les Européens à augmenter de manière historique leurs investissements. Les Européens sont prêts à faire davantage pour cette sécurité, beaucoup plus et beaucoup plus fort. Et plusieurs m'ont redit cela avant de venir vous voir. Monsieur le Président, cher Donald, vous l'avez compris, cette paix par la force à laquelle vous croyez, c'est celle à laquelle nous sommes engagés par conviction et parce que, en ce jour, je pense au peuple ukrainien, à ses sacrifices et à ce que nous lui devons. Nous avons également, avec Monsieur le Président, évoqué les sujets économiques et, au fond, notre volonté de voir plus de prospérité aux États-Unis et en Europe. Nous avons eu des discussions, elles seront poursuivies par nos ministres, nos équipes, pour clarifier les sujets qui doivent l'être. Mais au fond, notre volonté, c'est qu'il y ait une concurrence juste et, au fond, pas de biais dans la concurrence de nos industries pour pouvoir échanger. Et je veux ici dire combien les économies américaines et européennes sont liées. Ce sont les économies les plus imbriquées au monde. Ce sont 1 500 milliards de dollars d'échanges de produits, de services physiques et digitaux chaque année. Et je sais votre attachement à rétablir la balance des paiements. Oserais-je dire qu'en tant que président de France, j'ai la même, puisque nous avons aussi un déficit commercial. J'ai essayé aussi de faire valoir qu'il fallait regarder pas simplement les biens et produits, mais les produits numériques, pour lesquels vous êtes un très grand exportateur. Et au fond, la solution, c'est de nous réengager sincèrement vers une concurrence justement qui soit équitable et la volonté d'avoir des échanges plus fluides et encore davantage d'investissements. Vous êtes un très grand investisseur en France. Nous sommes le 5e investisseur, nous, France, pas simplement l'Europe, dans votre pays. Et je souhaite qu'on fasse davantage de part et d'autre. Et je veux saluer d'ailleurs tous les investisseurs américains qui ont fait partie des grandes annonces pour l'intelligence artificielle il y a quelques jours à Paris, où 120 milliards de dollars d'investissement ont été annoncés en intelligence artificielle pour notre pays. Au-delà du lien transatlantique, c'est notre volonté d'avoir en effet plus de prospérité. Je suis convaincu qu'il y a au fond un agenda positif derrière tout cela. Enfin, nous avons ensemble évoqué plusieurs sujets sur le Proche et Moyen-Orient. Et je crois pouvoir dire que nous partageons la même volonté de ne jamais voir l'Iran obtenir l'arme nucléaire, notre volonté de revenir à, au fond, une approche avec les partenaires de la région en qui nous avons confiance, qui permettent eh bien justement de cantonner les activités nucléaires iraniennes, de pouvoir limiter ses capacités balistiques et de réduire ses déstabilisations régionales. Et sur la Syrie et l'Irak, nous partageons la même volonté aussi de ne pas voir les groupes terroristes islamistes reprendre de la force, retrouver de l'activité, parce que depuis des années, nos armées sont avec courage engagées dans ces pays, dans l'opération Inherent Resolve, dont vous avez le commandement et à laquelle nous contribuons, qui est une mission forte et importante, qui a contribué à la stabilité de la région. Et je le dis avec ici beaucoup de sincérité, de force et d'engagement, puisque la France a été touchée par un attentat terroriste en 2015 qui avait été préparé en Syrie par ces mêmes groupes. Et donc nous ne céderons rien dans cette région à vos côtés pour plus de sécurité. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, en tout cas, nos échanges ont été extrêmement fructueux, à la fois ce matin à l'issue de notre visioconférence et à l'instant avec le vice-président, les ministres et nos conseillers. Et je veux vous dire combien, après ces échanges avec le président Trump, je suis convaincu qu'il y a un chemin. Nous avons partagé nos convictions, nos exigences. Nous savons tout le travail qui reste à faire. Et donc, dans les prochaines semaines, nous avancerons ensemble et nous aurons l'occasion, nos équipes puis nous, de nous revoir dans des formats différents pour faire de cette paix solide, durable, je l'espère avec beaucoup de force, une réalité de court terme. En tout cas, Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de vous remercier pour votre accueil, remercier pour la qualité de nos échanges et pour votre engagement. Merci, cher Donald.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Brian, would you like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Welcome, President Macron. I just want to touch upon real quickly the Harvard poll that came out that had, thank you very much, the Harvard poll that came out had you up 9+ points, and all of your agenda that you ran on, you're accomplishing that. You got the support of the American people, including stopping the war in Ukraine. If you can comment on the latest Harvard poll, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I was honored by it. It was a big poll, and it's usually a poll that leans on the other side of things, the other side of the world, so to speak. But the Harvard poll is a respected poll, and it has us not only leading, but leading by a lot, and leading on every single issue that we've talked about. And as I said, we've become the party of common sense, and I think that's a very important element now, common sense, because what's happening in the world and even in this country, some of the things that took place, many of them are now canceled, and the rest are being canceled as we speak. But we've moved very rapidly and I think very effectively. So I was honored by that poll. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Mr. President, you said before that you would like to see Russia.
Yes. Go ahead.
When you're meeting in Saudi Arabia with President Putin, will that happen regardless of any progress on the Ukrainian file?
Yeah, I think the meeting in Saudi Arabia was a fantastic one. We met with the Crown Prince, who's just a fantastic young guy. He's young, but with great imagination and tremendously respected all over the world. And he goes right to the king, and the king is incredible. Gotten to be friends with both of them very much, and they want to see this ended, and they're going all out to make sure that it is ended. I think Russia, likewise, I've spoken to President Putin, and my people are dealing with him constantly, and his people in particular. And they want to do something. I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals. And I know when somebody wants to make it and when somebody doesn't. I will say this, before I came here, there was no communication with Russia whatsoever, and Russia wasn't answering calls. They were not talking to anybody. They wouldn't talk to anybody, and people sort of accepted that as being that they want to go forward and just keep going without stop. But when I got here, one of the first calls I made was to President Putin, and we were treated with great respect, and they want to end this war. So that's a big thing, because I didn't know if I could say that, but it's a big thing. They want to do it, and the group in the front row that I introduced, they're all very active in it, and we're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement. I'd like to go directly to an agreement, but ceasefire will always happen a little bit quicker. And every day you're saving thousands, or at least hundreds, but thousands in some cases lives. So we want to see if we can get that done very quickly. Yes, for the President, please.
Thank you. Correspondent based in Paris. Question for both of you, actually. Mr. Macron, you were one of the last Western leaders to speak to Putin before Ukraine's invasion. What advice, what recommendation could you make to President Trump to make sure that this time you can get strong enough guarantees from Putin to get a peace deal that lasts this time? And Mr. President Trump, what makes you think you can trust Putin in those negotiations? Thank you.
Look, I will never give any advice to President Trump. We have friendly and trustful discussion, but my experience with President Putin is the following. Number one, I always think it's good to have discussion with other leaders, and especially when you disagree. I stopped my discussion with President Putin after Bucha and the war crimes because I considered that, we had nothing to get from him in that time. Now there is a big change because there is a new US administration, so this is a new context. So there is good reason for President Trump to re-engage with President Putin. But my experience is the following, and I shared it with President Trump and the team. In 2014, our predecessors negotiated peace with President Putin. But because of the lack of guarantees, and especially security guarantees, President Putin violated this peace. And I had several discussions, especially at the beginning of 2022, several times, 7 hours with President Putin, 15 days before the launching of the attack. He denied everything, but we didn't have security guarantees. So this is why being strong and having deterrence capacities is the only way to be sure it will be respected. And I insisted on that, and this is why I believe that the US has the capacity to do so. And this is why I think we should never say, I will never send any boots on the ground, because you give a blank check to violate any type of commitment. So I think it's good to have discussion. I think it's useful to have negotiation. I think it's super important to go to the peace. But my strong point was to say, let's try to get something first which can be assessed, checked and verified. And let's be sure that we build sufficient guarantees on the short run. And this is where we are ready to be engaged. As for France, a lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged. But we do need this American backup, because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees, and this is our collective deterrence capacity. And I have the feeling that the President has this capacity.
I think it's very much to the benefit of Russia to make a deal, and I feel that we'll do that. It is what it is. Again, it's a war that should have never been started. It's a war that would not have been started if I were president, but it did start, and it's at a terrible level where cities are burned down and shot down to the ground. It looks like demolition sites, a whole big pile of demolition sites, and we got to get it stopped. Too many people, too much agony. The whole culture is destroyed when you rip down some of those ancient, really ancient or near ancient buildings. It's so sad to see, but I think it's very much to the benefit of this tremendous distrust on both sides. That's why it's good that I'm coming in now, but I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal. Maybe wrong, but I believe he wants to make a deal. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Next week, there's a key deadline for your Canada and Mexico tariffs. Do you expect those will go back on, or do you believe those countries have done enough on the border to stop those from taking effect? And for President Macron, I'm wondering if you believe that this critical minerals deal with Ukraine represents a de facto security guarantee by the United States, since the U.S. would have an interest in protecting those reserves in Ukraine. Thank you.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, you know, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything. Every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night, and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this? So the tariffs will go forward, yes, and we're going to make up a lot of territory. All we want is reciprocal. We want reciprocity. We want to have the same. So if somebody charges us, we charge them. It's very simple, but it'll be very good for our country. Our country will be extremely liquid and rich again. Plus, we're doing other things, as you know. We're finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse at levels that nobody thought possible. You're seeing what's going on. And that was also part of the Harvard poll. Do you agree with what President Trump is doing with Elon and others that are looking for the waste, fraud, and abuse? And the numbers were staggering. It was like 70% to 2%. Everybody wants to find out. They don't like it. And, you know, the radical left or whoever it may be starts screaming about the Constitution, but it has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has to do with fairness to this country. It has to do with being ripped off. And when you read the things that all of these billions, and I mean many billions, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on, that's all you have to do is stand up here and read them. I could stand up all day and read the kind of things where we're spending all of this money. The good news is that when you think of how rich a nation we can be when we get rid of this, you know, sometimes you'll buy a company and you'll see it was really well run. They accounted for every penny. Well, not much you can do there. You got yourself a bad deal. This one is the exact opposite. Tremendous fraud, tremendous waste. And when you think of what it is, you know, Elon uses the expression caring. If we had people that cared, just cared a little bit when they did contracts, when they negotiated with outside vendors on behalf of the United States. That's what I'm doing now. I'm negotiating for the people of the United States. So we're doing a great job of it. I will say we found it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud and abuse. Thank you. Please.
Look, I think this discussion is a very important one. First, because it's important for the US, and it will be a good occasion for a first very important meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. Second, I think there is a lot of economic upside on both sides. And third, de facto, there is a recognition of Ukrainian sovereignty, a recognition of the Ukrainian interests, and this is de facto a very important alignment of interests. Now, the security guarantees will be negotiated in due time in a full-fledged package of a peace security. But this peace, as it is now written and negotiated, and as this meeting is scheduled, is an important step forward, full-fledged peace agreement.
Okay, please, go ahead. To the President.
Monsieur le Président Trump, Monsieur le Président Macron, Monsieur Trump, first of all, you say, I would like to make a deal with Putin. So when you do a deal, it's a win-win deal. What are you giving to him, and what is he going to give you, to America? And I was impressed by the way you referred to Notre Dame, and that you were impressed by the reconstruction of Notre Dame. A lot of Americans have sent money to Paris to participate to the reconstruction of Notre Dame. As a President of the United States, are you going to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine? Et Monsieur le Président Macron, quelle est pour vous la principale avancée de votre entretien avec Donald Trump? Et pouvez-vous nous confirmer qu'il y a effectivement un accord pour envoyer des troupes européennes de maintien de la paix? Est-ce que la France va le faire? Combien d'hommes? Pour faire quoi? Et est-ce que ce n'est pas un grand danger d'envoyer des troupes françaises ou européennes en Ukraine? Merci.
Well, I guess it's a little strange question because you ask whether or not we're going to, on behalf of the United States, contribute to Ukraine. I mean, we're in there for about $350 billion. I think that's a pretty big contribution. I do appreciate the first part of your question, however, because I think they've done an incredible job with the Cathedral of Notre Dame. I think the president has done. I know he headed it up, and I know how hard he worked, and it took a period of time, but really not a long period of time considering what that was, so delicate, so beautiful. And I was there, and I saw the work, and I'm very good at construction. I know good construction. I know bad construction. They did a beautiful job, and this man has to be given a lot of credit for that. It's an incredible cathedral. Most people thought it couldn't be saved, and if it was, it would have to be built in a different form, and we didn't want to see a different form. We wanted to see the same form that you built. So I just want to congratulate you. That was an amazing job. I don't think you've gotten enough credit for it. Someday you will. Someday you will.
Thank you, Donald. Merci beaucoup. Pour revenir à votre question, je considère que la discussion d'aujourd'hui a été marquée par plusieurs avancées. D'abord, la confirmation, c'était une des choses importantes pour nous. Ça fait partie de tout le travail qu'on a mené aussi avec le président Zelensky pour essayer de bâtir une proposition d'action qui soit acceptable pour l'Ukraine. Le fait que le président Trump a confirmé qu'il allait rencontrer rapidement le président Zelensky pour finaliser l'accord sur les minerais critiques et les terres rares et pour avoir une discussion d'ensemble dans ce contexte. Ça, je pense que c'est un point très important. La deuxième chose, nous avons, dans le cadre de la discussion, nous sommes rentrés dans le détail de la proposition d'action que nous venions faire, de comment la paix ou en tout cas une trêve, des éléments concrets, mesurables pouvaient être organisés et comment ensuite on pouvait structurer la discussion. Et donc la France, plusieurs autres pays européens, l'Ukraine sont évidemment maintenant au travail pour pouvoir bâtir ce qui est cette paix durable, avec des éléments très concrets dans lesquels il y aura justement les garanties de sécurité, les questions territoriales qui appartiennent totalement à l'Ukraine, la question de la reconstruction, la question du potentiel économique et des minerais rares. Et donc là-dessus, on a pu discuter en détail de ces propositions d'action. Et puis, troisième avancée qui est pour moi vraiment un des acquis de notre discussion d'aujourd'hui et qui marque un tournant, c'est la précision avec laquelle nous avons parlé des garanties de sécurité. Et je pense que le président a eu lui-même tout à l'heure et encore aujourd'hui, à l'instant, des mots très clairs. Il veut la paix. Nous voulons la paix, on est totalement d'accord. Nous voulons un deal rapide, mais pas un accord qui soit fragile. Et le fait qu'il y ait des Européens qui soient prêts à s'engager pour apporter leur réponse à ces garanties de sécurité, et qu'il y ait une clarté maintenant du message américain sur le fait que les États-Unis d'Amérique, comme alliés, étaient prêts à apporter justement un soutien, une solidarité à cette approche est pour moi un tournant. Et c'était un des acquis de ce déplacement et de nos discussions. Pour ce qui est des troupes, je veux ici clarifier les choses. On a pu par le passé, en particulier il y a un an, à des fins qui étaient à mes yeux pleinement légitimes, évoquer la possibilité d'envoi de troupes dans un contexte de guerre. C'était pour recréer de l'incertitude stratégique. Là, quand on parle de troupes, on en parle le lendemain de la négociation d'une discussion de paix durable. Et donc, une fois qu'il y a une paix solide, durable, négociée, signée par l'Ukraine et la Russie, dont nous serons collectivement les garants, la France a travaillé avec le Royaume-Uni ces dernières semaines pour dire « nous, on est prêts à contribuer ». Et donc, on a eu un plan qui a été discuté entre nos entités militaires pour dire « nous, on est prêts ». Pas d'aller sur le front, pas aller dans des territoires contestés ou occupés, mais à marquer notre soutien pour nous assurer que la paix telle que négociée et signée par les deux parties est bien préservée. Et donc, ce sont des déploiements, si je puis dire, totalement pacifiques, non engagés dans des combats, mais qui sont, si je puis dire, des déploiements de force de garantie. Elles seront, par définition, limitées, mais elles marquent une solidarité. J'ai échangé, je vous l'ai dit, avec tous nos alliés. Il y a plusieurs pays, européens et non européens, qui sont prêts à participer à cet effort. Les uns en continuant à aider l'armée ukrainienne, à maintenir ses capacités, à être dans la durée en termes de nombre de soldats ou en termes d'équipement. Les autres par la logistique ou les capacités sur le terrain, d'autres aussi à venir à nos côtés. Leur question à tous, c'était est-ce que c'est d'accord avec les États-Unis d'Amérique? Et le président a eu des mots très forts tout à l'heure pour dire oui, et pour même d'ailleurs nous apprendre que dans les discussions qui étaient en cours avec la Russie, c'était acceptable dans les échanges qu'il y avait eu avec la Russie. Et donc ça, c'est une avancée très forte, et donc ça veut dire que les Européens prennent dans ce contexte leur part du fardeau, puisque on s'engage, on avance, qu'on garde ce qui est la force de notre alliance à travers les décennies, qui est notre solidarité et du coup la capacité de dissuasion que nous avons ensemble. Et donc non, ça n'est pas dangereux, parce qu'en fait, qu'est-ce que ça signifie? Qu'il y a un accord qui va être signé par l'Ukraine et la Russie, qui a été déclenché par le président Trump, dont nous sommes les garants, et qu'en quelque sorte, si la Russie venait à le violer, elle rentrerait de facto en conflit avec tous ceux qui se sont engagés dans un processus de paix. Et ça, c'est un changement. Ça n'a jamais existé ces dernières années. Ce n'est pas ce qu'on avait fait en 2014. Et donc, c'est ça la vraie rupture. C'est d'avoir quelque chose de solide avec la capacité de dissuasion américaine, la capacité d'engagement des Européens est quelque chose qu'on va justement organiser ensemble. Voilà, donc ce n'est pas dangereux, mais c'est crédible. Et ça nous semble moins dangereux que des choses qui iraient beaucoup plus loin en termes juridiques. Et ça nous semble ce que nous devons faire pour garantir la sécurité. Et je vais vous le dire ici très clairement, c'est la sécurité aussi des Européens dont il s'agit. Et moi, c'est ce que je dis depuis des semaines. Si on ne garantit pas la sécurité de cette part du territoire de l'Europe, comment garantir notre propre sécurité à tous? Nous, nous vivons à 1500 kilomètres de l'Ukraine, nous Français. Et c'est encore plus près quand on est évidemment polonais ou allemand. Donc c'est notre engagement pour la sécurité collective. Et en quelque sorte, c'est répondre aussi à l'appel qui nous est fait. Vous devez, vous, autres Européens, être davantage engagés. Mais nous, Américains, nous restons en solidarité. On le fait en Ukraine et on doit le faire aussi pour notre sécurité collective. Mais la clarification qu'on a eue aujourd'hui, pour moi, est un tournant.
Emmanuel, thank you very much. Great job, and it's been wonderful being with you. Say hello to your beautiful wife, and we will see you again soon. We'll be speaking often. We'll get this thing worked out. We're going to get it done. So important, and great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. We'll take care of it. Very useful. Thank you. Yeah, no problem, man.